He was 19 when the sirens painted his bedroom walls, and 46 when the door finally opened again. 27 years gone. No body cam to review, no letter waiting on the desk, just a plastic bag with a life he had the night they took him. One witness who was not sure. A deal he did not understand. A system that moved faster than he could speak. The verdict was life. The evidence that could have helped him was called irrelevant. He kept saying the same thing for 27 years. I was not there. We will call him Marcus. The night everything changed, 2 blocks from his mother's apartment, a corner store robbery turned fatal. The police needed a suspect before sunrise. A description went out, tall, dark hoodie. Wrong place, wrong hour. Marcus fit what they were looking for, which is not the same as fitting the truth. He had no car, no money, no lawyer on speed dial. He had a time card from a dishwashing job and a bus transfer that nobody bothered to check. At the station, the questions came as a story, not a search for one. You ran, didn't you? You bumped the clerk, didn't you? You were angry. You needed cash. 12 hours later, exhausted and alone, he signed a statement that said he was near the store. Not in the store. Near. That one word would follow him like a shadow. The state had a witness, a man who told the jury he saw Marcus. Months later, that same witness was given leniency in his own case. The jury never heard about the deal. The jury never heard that the store cameras were broken that week. The jury never heard that a jacket collected by officers did not match Marcus's size. His public defender met him for 12 minutes before trial. There are meetings that last longer for coffee than the meeting that decided the rest of his life. Guilty. Life. No parole until numbers that felt impossible. The appeals process is called a safeguard, but for Marcus, it was a maze with moving walls. Every door needed new proof. He could not reach without help he did not have. His mother kept a box under her bed. Report cards, a bus pass, the transfer from the night printed in fading ink. She wrote everyone, a journalist, a nonprofit, a pastor who knew a lawyer who knew another lawyer. Most letters came back with a form response. Some never came back at all. Then, a small crack of light. An innocence group took the case. Volunteers, law students, a retired investigator who kept a list of names that never stopped growing. They did the thing no one had done. They looked again. The jacket log from the scene could not be found. The tape was blank. But there was something else. A second evidence box, misfiled by a clerk 17 years earlier. Inside, a partial print on a candy display and a grocery receipt with a timestamp that cut across the state's timeline like a wire. The print was not Marcus's. It matched someone with a violent record, arrested in another county 2 years after Marcus went away. The district attorney's office resisted. Chain of custody. Degradation over time. Explanations that sound like process but feel like delay. On paper, these are neutral words. In a cell, they add another winter to a life. A hearing was scheduled. The witness recanted. He said he felt pressure. He said he was offered help. He said he knew he was not sure. The judge listened, took notes, and set a new date. Marcus went back to wait. Waiting is its own sentence. When the ruling came, it did not say what Marcus hoped. It did not say wrong. It said vacated, pending review. The office wanted to keep the option to try again. The word innocent was still locked away behind a door that no one wanted to open. Then the twist. The man whose print was found on the candy display had died 3 years earlier. No trial to run parallel. No confession to secure. The office explained that without a living alternative suspect, the narrative would confuse a jury. They offered Marcus a deal. Time served, no admission of error. Take the door, but not the truth. He signed, because sometimes freedom is a form you do not want to read twice. On the sidewalk, the innocence group shook his hand. His mother held on longer. The first meal outside tasted like salt and relief, and the silence that follows a room that never stops talking. Free, but not recognized as innocent. Compensation was complicated. In his state, you do not qualify unless the court writes the word wrongful in a specific way. The office said the case was resolved. Resolved is not the same word as repaired. He tried to find work. 27 years does not fit on a resume neatly. The world had new rules. Phones with no buttons, offices with no receptionists. He learned slow, then faster. He visited the corner store. That started it all. It had become a deli, then a vape shop, then a florist. The owner did not know his name. No one apologized. Not the detective. Not the office. Not the public defender's supervisor. The system is not built to say sorry. It is built to move on. So Marcus wrote his own ending. He spoke at a community center on Tuesdays. He stood in front of a whiteboard and told teenagers the one thing he wished someone had told him. You are allowed to ask for time. You are allowed to say, I do not understand. You are allowed to not sign. He told them how questions can become accusations when you are tired, how near can be stretched into there, how process is powerful, and how power rarely says it is sorry. He held up the bus transfer his mother had saved, the ink almost gone, and said that sometimes the thing that could save you is ordinary and small and buried in a box no one opens for years. He visits his mother every Sunday. They sit by the window. They count the buses together the way they used to when he was a kid, making a game of the routes and the colors. She asks what he will talk about this week. And he says the same thing he always says, that the truth does not move unless people push it. He walks home past the building where he lived as a teenager. The paint is new. The door code is different. The hallway smells like a different kind of cleaner. He thinks about the judge's words, the ones that unlocked the gate, but not the word he wanted most. He thinks about all the letters his mother wrote, and the ones that never came back, and the one that did, once, from a stranger who said, I believe you. He keeps that letter in his pocket. On nights when the city is loud in a way he still isn't used to, he takes it out and reads it under a streetlight. He tries to imagine the face of the person who wrote it. He imagines a clerk who misfiled the box. He imagines a witness who finally said he wasn't sure. He imagines a detective, older now, maybe retired, maybe not sleeping well. He wonders if any of them ever think of him when the house is quiet. He is learning how to live in a world that changed while he was gone. He is learning the names of apps and how to press and hold instead of just press. He is learning that some doors open when you swipe, and some only open when someone else decides they should. He is learning to cook with his mother's recipes, to measure with his eyes the way she does, to make the kitchen smell like Sundays used to smell. He is learning that time does not return, but it can be tended. He stands in front of the room on Tuesdays and tells the same story in different words, because the faces in the chairs are different each week. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. He says that the system is a machine with many small parts, and any one of them can grind you down if you stand too close for too long.